It was a quiet, peaceful morning in Rome. The sun was shining brightly over the ancient city, casting golden rays on the stone buildings and winding cobblestone streets. The bustling crowds of tourists, cameras in hand, were snapping selfies by the Colosseum and making their way down Via dei Fori Imperiali. The sounds of excited chatter and the occasional bus honking filled the air. Everything seemed normal. Perfectly normal, in fact. But beneath this vibrant city, where life was bustling above ground, there was something dark and forgotten, hidden away for centuries. I never would have thought about it on a morning like this, one so bright and full of life. But there's a truth to every city that lies beneath its surface. And in Rome, that truth is buried deep beneath the city's ancient streets. The tombs, the catacombs, the lost, forgotten places no one speaks of. At least, not until someone decides to venture into the shadows, only to find something they wish they never knew. And once you hear the story, it's impossible to unhear it. You see, these aren't the usual tourist destinations where you pay a ticket, take a guided tour, and marvel at the ancient history. These tombs are secret, hidden beneath the ground for centuries, tucked away in the oldest neighborhoods of Rome. Only a handful of people, those with the courage or the obsession, know about them. And once you know, there's no turning back. You'll feel the pull. You'll hear the whispers. I was just like you, normal, living my life. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. And then, one day, I heard the story. It came from an old man, someone who looked like he'd lived through decades of history. His eyes were dark and tired, and he had a way of speaking that made everything sound like a warning. Like he was trying to stop me from asking more questions. But I couldn't stop myself. He was a local, someone who had worked in the ancient parts of Rome, in the area where tourists rarely tread. He mentioned the catacombs, but not the ones you read about in travel books. These were different. He spoke of a series of tombs hidden from view, buried beneath layers of time and stone, long forgotten by the world above. There's a place below this city, he said, his voice low and gravely, a place where the dead never rest, where souls wander, forever lost. At first, I thought it was just an old man's tale, something to add to the long list of spooky stories that get passed around. But the more he spoke, the more I felt an odd chill creep up my spine. The way he spoke about it, the way his voice faltered when he mentioned the whispers, it was clear he wasn't just telling a story. He believed it. He'd seen something down there, something none of us should ever see. The more he spoke, the more intrigued I became. What was he talking about? Why hadn't I heard of this before? Rome is a city of legends, of ancient tales that go back millennia. It's a city where the past never really leaves. But this story, this one, was different. The way he spoke of the tombs, as if the very ground itself held a secret, made my curiosity grow. I felt a strange pull, a sensation that something was calling to me, urging me to look deeper. I should have walked away. I should have turned my back and never asked him another question. But like a fool, I couldn't. I pressed him for more. "Where are they?" I asked, almost breathlessly. "What do you know about them?" The man hesitated, glancing around as if he feared someone might overhear. His wrinkled hands shook slightly, and his gaze grew darker. "They are hidden," he said, "tucked away beneath the catacombs, where no one goes, where the souls are, trapped." He stopped, looking at me with a haunted expression, like he'd seen something terrible. And once you hear about them, once you know they exist, you can never forget it. It's like they know you're coming. The idea of it, of lost souls trapped beneath a city so old, was so unsettling that it almost felt unreal. But I couldn't shake the thought of it. The image of these forgotten tombs, hidden and ancient, filled my mind. The more I thought about it, the more I couldn't stop myself from wanting to know more. That night, I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The whispers the old man had spoken of lingered in my ears. The lost souls, the tombs. I felt like something was pulling me, almost as if the tombs themselves were calling my name. Maybe it was the thrill of discovering something new, or maybe it was the sheer curiosity. I didn't know, but I had to see it for myself. I decided to find the tombs. I had to see them, even if it meant venturing into the unknown. The old man had mentioned a hidden passage near one of Rome's oldest neighborhoods. It wasn't marked on any map. No tours went down there. No one talked about it. Only a few who were brave enough or foolish enough ever ventured close. The next morning, I woke up early, before the city became crowded with tourists. I left my apartment, walking through the narrow, winding streets of Rome's oldest quarter, where the air felt thick with history. The buildings were old here, their stone walls weathered by centuries of change. I followed the directions the old man had given me, each step feeling like I was moving further away from the world I knew. I eventually found myself standing in front of an old, weathered door, tucked away behind a building. The door was barely noticeable, hidden by ivy and shadows. The entrance was cracked, as if it had been untouched for centuries. I took a deep breath, the air suddenly colder than I expected, and pushed the door open. Inside, the air was damp and still. It smelled of old stone and decay. The darkness was almost suffocating, but I could make out faint markings on the walls, symbols that seemed out of place, like ancient writing I couldn't understand. As I stepped further in, I felt the temperature drop. It was as if the tombs themselves were alive, and they were watching me. The path ahead twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the forgotten tombs. With every step, I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me. And then, I heard it, a whisper, soft at first, barely audible. It wasn't my imagination. It was real. Get out. The voice was faint, but clear enough that I could make it out. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The voice had come from nowhere, and it echoed in the still air. I wasn't alone. The deeper I went, the more I realized that I had made a grave mistake. The tombs were just forgotten. They were alive with something else, something waiting for me. I had just begun to uncover the truth, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to know what lay ahead. But at that moment, I knew one thing for sure. I had crossed a line. I had ventured into a place where the living shouldn't go, and I could feel the whispers of the lost souls closing in around me. There was no turning back now. The day had started off as a typical one. Rome, a city of beauty and history, was bustling with the energy of its usual tourists, the streets alive with the sounds of laughter, conversations, and the hum of activity. The Colosseum stood tall, basking in the late afternoon light, casting its long shadow on the cobbled streets. The sun was beginning to dip, giving the sky a soft golden hue that bathed the ancient city in warmth. Yet, even as the world outside thrived, I was about to delve into something that was as far removed from the normal life above as possible. I had heard the stories. Of course, everyone in Rome had, really. The locals spoke of the catacombs beneath the city, a place where the ancient dead were buried, their spirits still restless after all these years. These were not the typical places you visited as part of a tourist route. The tombs I had in mind were hidden, secret, and guarded by time. Forgotten by most, and shrouded in a thick veil of mystery. The spirits, trapped between this world and the next, were said to wander through the darkness, never allowed to rest. The story was simple enough. People had died centuries ago, their bodies long decayed, yet their souls remained. These souls were said to be bound to the tombs, unable to move on, doomed to walk the cold, silent halls forever. Some people swore they had heard whispers in the dark. Others claimed to have seen shapes moving in the shadows. But no one truly knew the truth. As I heard these stories, they seemed like nothing more than eerie folklore. I couldn't resist, though. The curiosity was overwhelming. The stories were too strange, too enticing to let go. And so, on a late afternoon, after the crowds of tourists had begun to dwindle, I decided it was time. I would explore these hidden tombs. I was prepared. I had a flashlight in hand, my camera to document whatever I found, and a sense of eager excitement. I wasn't about to let fear stop me. I had been in dark places before. Dark caves, dark alleys, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. The entrance to the tombs was tucked away, hidden behind a crumbling stone wall, its existence known only to a few. As I pushed open the rusty door, a chill immediately hit my skin. The air was damp and a musty smell lingered, like old earth and stone that had been undisturbed for centuries. I stood still for a moment, taking in the silence. The city of Rome, so vibrant just moments ago, was now miles away. There was no sound here, no traffic, no voices, just the cold embrace of the tombs beneath. I stepped inside, the soft glow of my flashlight cutting through the pitch-black darkness. The narrow corridor stretched out before me, its walls lined with the remnants of ancient carvings, faded images of people long forgotten, and symbols I didn't recognize. As I moved deeper, the temperature seemed to drop further. The air felt heavy, as if it was thick with something unseen, something old. A strange sensation tugged at me, a feeling that I was not alone in this place, even though I couldn't see anyone. I told myself it was just my imagination. It was just the oppressive atmosphere of the tombs, nothing more. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The darkness seemed to breathe around me, each step I took reverberating through the stone like a whisper in the night. I adjusted my flashlight, its beam flickering for a brief second, casting strange, eerie shadows on the walls. It wasn't until I rounded a corner in the narrow passage that I first heard it. A whisper. It was faint, barely audible at first, like a breath of air brushing against the back of my neck. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze. My first instinct was to dismiss it. It's just the wind, I thought. Just the sound of the air moving through these old tunnels. But the whisper didn't go away. It lingered in the stillness, just enough to make the hairs on my neck stand up. I turned slowly, expecting to see someone behind me. But the passage was empty. The only sound was the faint echo of my own breath. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly as it broke the silence. I was almost embarrassed by how weak my voice sounded in that moment. But there was no reply. The only sound was my own breath, echoing off the cold stone walls. I shook my head, trying to rationalize it. It's nothing. Just nerves. It's probably the wind, I muttered to myself. But even as I spoke, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The air felt too still, too thick. Something was lurking just out of sight. I pressed forward, determined to get to the bottom of whatever this place was hiding. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled onto something ancient, something forgotten by time, and perhaps by good reason. The deeper I ventured into the tombs, the more oppressive the silence became. Every step I took seemed to echo through the halls, but there was something about that silence that felt unnatural, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. Then, as I continued to walk down the winding corridor, the whisper came again. This time, it was clearer, louder, and unmistakable. It was my name. "It's your name, Watson." The voice was soft, almost melodic, yet it sent a wave of cold terror rushing through my veins. I froze in my tracks. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked around frantically. But there was no one. No shadowy figure standing in the corner. No flicker of movement in the dark. Just the eerie silence of the tombs. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I was sure I had heard it. Unmistakably, the voice had called to me. And yet, the voice wasn't one I recognized. It wasn't a person. There was something about it that felt distant, disconnected, like a whisper from another world. It sounded like it was coming from far away, as though it was carried on the wind that seemed to haunt these tombs. I called out again, my voice shaking more this time. "Who's there?" But again, no response came. Only the silence. And yet, that whisper seemed to linger in the air, heavy with some unspoken warning. The cold in the air grew more intense, pressing in on me from every side. The stillness, too, was suffocating. I felt as though I had wandered too far into a place that wasn't meant to be disturbed. A place where the dead still walked, their voices trapped in the shadows. The further I went, the more I could feel them. The lost souls, their presence all around me, as if they were watching, waiting for me to venture further. But I couldn't turn back now. I had to know what was down here, what the story meant, what the old man had warned me about. But with every step I took, the whispers grew louder, more frantic, more desperate. It was as if they were calling to me, pulling me further into the depths of the forgotten tombs. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I was no longer alone. I pressed forward, but the air felt heavier now, more oppressive. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They had become voices, faint yet distinct, calling out to me from the darkness. And no matter how much I tried to ignore them, they were always there, just beyond the edge of my vision, just out of reach. I couldn't stop myself. I was drawn deeper into the tombs, into the darkness where the lost souls still wandered, their voices lingering like shadows in the cold silence. But I didn't know if I would make it out of this place, because in the darkness, I realized something terrifying. Once you hear the whispers, they never leave. As I ventured further into the tombs, the sense of isolation grew stronger. The silence, which had felt oppressive at first, now seemed to suffocate me. The air around me was thick and heavy, the stale breath of centuries-old stone pressing in from all sides. The faint whispers that had started as a strange curiosity now became a constant companion, like an invisible presence that was always just behind me. The deeper I went, the more intense the whispers became, more insistent, as though the very walls of the tombs were alive, breathing with the voices of the past. At first, I thought I could dismiss them as tricks of my mind. After all, this place was old, forgotten, and filled with the kind of eerie atmosphere that plays tricks on your senses. But the longer I walked, the more I realized the whispers were not just sounds, but something more, something tied to this place, to the souls that had been trapped here for eternity. It wasn't until I passed through a particularly narrow passage that I truly began to understand the meaning of lost souls. I had come across many catacombs before, dark, cold spaces where the bones of the dead rested, where the air was thick with the weight of history. But these tombs were different. These weren't simply resting places for the dead. They were prisons for the souls of those who had passed on, but whose spirits could never find peace. I could feel it now, more than ever, the way the very air seemed to hum with a restless energy, the way the walls seemed to pulse with the force of memories, trapped in an endless loop. The deeper I went, the more I felt these souls, forever stuck in their last moments, reliving their deaths over and over, their suffering echoing through the stone. Their memories were twisted, locked in an endless cycle, their final moments replaying in their minds, like a movie that could never end. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sadness as I walked, knowing that these souls were stuck here, doomed to wander forever in the darkness. It was as if they had been forgotten by time, forgotten by the world, their names lost to history. No one remembered them. No one cared. They were simply echoes of a past long gone, shadows of lives that had ended long ago but could never move on. My flashlight beam flickered, and I stopped dead in my tracks, the hairs on my neck standing on end. I turned it on and off again, hoping it was just the battery. But the beam went out again, and for a split second, I was plunged into darkness. In that moment, the silence was deafening. The whispers, which had been a constant murmur in the background, suddenly stopped. It was as though the tombs themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something. And then, in the void of darkness, I heard it. A voice, not a whisper this time, but something much clearer, much more urgent. "Get out." The voice was soft, almost drowned out by the stillness of the tomb, but it was unmistakable. It was a voice, desperate, pleading. It didn't sound like it came from any living person. The sound of it seemed to linger in the air, hanging around me like a cold breeze. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I froze, not knowing whether to move forward or turn back. I quickly turned the flashlight back on, the beam cutting through the darkness once more. I glanced around, my eyes scanning the tomb. But all I could see were the cold stone walls, the faint outlines of ancient carvings, and the distant shadows that stretched across the floor. The tomb was empty. There was no one who could have spoken those words. But I knew what I had heard. "Get out," the voice had said, and it wasn't just a warning. It was a command. The urgency in those words sent a chill down my spine. It felt as though whatever presence was here, whatever force was pulling at me, was aware of my intrusion. It wasn't just a random whisper anymore. It felt like something watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to venture too far. I turned around, my flashlight trembling in my hand, and the whispers began again. This time, they were louder, more distinct. They were no longer coming from just one direction, but from everywhere, surrounding me, closing in on me. I tried to ignore them, but the sound of their voices was growing, rising, until it became overwhelming. It was as if the very tombs themselves were alive with these lost souls, their voices rising from the cracks in the walls, from the dust in the air. I quickened my pace, moving down the narrow passageway, hoping to escape the voices that were beginning to surround me. But the tombs seemed to stretch on forever, and the farther I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the tombs were pushing back, urging me to turn around, to leave before it was too late. But I couldn't. I was too deep now, too far into this forgotten place. And part of me knew that turning back wouldn't solve anything. The whispers would follow me. The lost souls would haunt me, just as they had haunted this place for centuries. I stumbled across something then, something that made my breath catch in my throat. It was an old stone tablet, covered in dust, half buried beneath the debris. The markings on it were unlike anything I had ever seen before. Ancient symbols that seemed to writhe beneath my gaze. They were faint, barely visible under the grime that had accumulated over centuries. But there was no mistaking what I saw. This was a message, a warning. As I moved closer to inspect the tablet, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. They were no longer the quiet murmurs of the tomb. They were voices, clear and desperate, pleading for help. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I felt a strange, heavy weight pressing on my chest. It was as if the souls themselves were trying to communicate with me, but their words were twisted, unintelligible. "Help us," a voice whispered in my ear. It sounded so close, so real, that I felt the chill of someone's breath on my skin. I whirled around, but there was no one there. No figure in the shadows, just the stone walls, cold and empty. My heart raced. I had to get out. I had to leave this place before whatever was down here consumed me. I backed away from the stone tablet, my mind racing with questions. What was this place? What had happened to these souls? And why were they still here, trapped in this darkness? I felt the darkness closing in on me. The whispers were deafening now, rising to a crescendo, filling my head with their voices. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. It felt like the tombs themselves were alive, pushing me toward the very center of their dark heart. And in that heart, I could feel it. An ancient power, something far older than anything I had ever known. Something that had been waiting, watching. And now that I was here, it wasn't going to let me leave. I tried to turn back, but the tunnel seemed endless. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, the air growing thick with the weight of centuries. And in that moment, I realized just how far gone I was. I was no longer just an observer. I was a part of this place now. Just another lost soul, another whisper in the dark, forever trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. The whispers didn't stop. They followed me, growing louder, more insistent with every step I took. At first, it was just a faint murmur, like a distant conversation I couldn't quite understand. But now, it felt as if the very air around me was thick with voices, each one vying for my attention. They pressed against my ears, crawled beneath my skin, filled the space inside my head, whispering things I couldn't comprehend. Every breath I took seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 lost souls, their desperate calls lingering in. I had to get out. My mind was starting to unravel under the constant barrage of voices. I tried to push through, walking faster, telling myself that I had just wandered too deep, that I was merely overthinking everything. But it was no use. The deeper I went, the stronger the voices became, until they were no longer whispers, but full-fledged conversations, loud and clear, echoing around me. I couldn't escape them. There was nowhere to hide. The tombs had a grip on me, and it was tightening with each passing second. As I moved forward, my nerves began to fray. The feeling of being watched had returned, this time stronger than ever. The silence that had once seemed comforting now felt suffocating, and the darkness closed in on me like a living thing. I tried to shake the feeling off, but it wouldn't leave. And then it happened. A cold hand brushed my shoulder. The sensation was so real, so chilling, that my heart leapt into my throat. I spun around, my flashlight flashing wildly in the dark, but there was nothing there. No one. Just the empty, suffocating tombs stretching out before me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing. It had been so real, so tangible, that I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, standing just out of sight. Panic began to rise in my chest. My pulse quickened, and I turned back, desperate to find the entrance, the way out. I had to leave. I had to get out of this place. But as I retraced my steps, the tombs seemed to shift, their winding passages stretching and twisting before me in an impossible labyrinth. The entrance, the way I had come in, was nowhere to be found. I couldn't remember which way I had gone, and the more I looked around, the more the tombs seemed to change. I was lost. Completely, utterly lost. My heartbeat hammered in my chest as I spun around, trying to find anything familiar, any sign that would lead me back. But there was nothing. The darkness was thick, and the silence was unnerving. I was alone, with nothing but the whispers to keep me company. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, something watching, waiting. The voices, too, had changed. They were no longer random whispers, scattered like wind. They were distinct, clear, and full of urgency. Some of them sounded anguished, as though they were trying to tell me something important. Others were angry, their voices filled with bitterness and pain. And then there were the pleading ones, soft, desperate calls, begging me to stop, begging me to leave. But I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where the exit was, and no matter how many turns I took, I couldn't escape. Then, in the midst of my panic, I stumbled upon it. The heart of the tombs. I had no idea how I had arrived here, or what had drawn me to this place. But when I entered the cavernous chamber, I knew immediately that it was significant. The air was thick with the weight of ancient history. The walls were covered in carvings and faded paintings, depictions of figures I didn't recognize, their faces twisted in agony or in some eternal act of worship. They looked as though they were pleading with someone or something. something that had been lost to time. In the center of the room stood an altar, old and worn by centuries of neglect. It was covered in dust, the stone surface etched with the same strange symbols I had seen on the walls. The altar seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as though it was alive, watching me, waiting. And beneath it, beneath the altar, there was something that stopped me in my tracks. Bones, scattered and unburied, human remains piled in a haphazard manner, as though they had been left there deliberately, abandoned in the most grotesque way imaginable. They were not arranged in any respectful manner, no care given to them. They were simply cast aside, left to decay in the dark corners of this forgotten place. I stared at the bones for what felt like an eternity, my breath shallow, my mind struggling to comprehend what I was seeing. The whispers, now deafening in their intensity, seemed to circle around me, urging me to move forward, to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden in the depths of this cursed place. The air was thick with dread, and I could feel the oppressive weight of the tomb pressing down on me. Something had happened here. Something terrible. As I stepped closer to the altar, I felt the temperature drop even further. The cold seeped into my bones, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I could barely make out the words now, but I knew they were speaking of something far older than I could understand. Something that had been sealed away for centuries. The power in this room, whatever it was ancient. It wasn't just the souls of the dead that had been trapped here. There was something else, something darker, something that had been buried with them, locked away to keep it from escaping. The walls seemed to close in around me, the very air growing heavier with each passing second. I was no longer just surrounded by the tombs. I was inside them, completely immersed in the darkness. I had ventured too far, and now I was paying the price. I placed my hand on the altar, and the moment I did, a jolt of energy shot through me, cold, sharp, like 1,000 needles pricking at my skin. It was as though I had touched something that shouldn't be touched, something that had been sealed away for a reason. The bones beneath me seemed to stir, and the whispers turned to screams, shrill and horrifying. The tombs themselves were alive, reacting to the disturbance. And for the first time, I understood the true nature of this place. The tombs weren't just burial sites for the dead. They were prisons. They had been built not just to bury the dead, but to keep something in and to keep something out. A force, a power, older than anything I had ever imagined, had been sealed away with these souls, and I had unknowingly disturbed it. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn and flee, but the path back was gone. The tombs had shifted again, rearranged themselves in ways I couldn't understand. There was no way out anymore. I was trapped, just like the souls before me. And the curse that had bound them here, that had trapped them in eternal torment, was now closing in around me. ready to claim me as its next victim. I could feel it now. This ancient power, this force that had been buried for centuries, was awakening. It had been waiting for someone like me to come along, someone foolish enough to disturb it. And now I could feel its grip tightening around me, pulling me deeper into the heart of the tombs. There was no escaping it. There was no way out. I was lost, trapped, and the curse that held these souls was now mine to bear. I tried to leave. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to find a way out of this cursed place. But the tombs, they wouldn't let me go. The very walls seemed to shift around me, blocking any path I tried to take. I walked down corridors I thought I knew, only to find them leading me deeper into the darkness, into the heart of the tombs. The air around me thickened, became heavier, colder, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me with its weight. The longer I stayed, the more the air seemed to wrap itself around me, almost like a physical presence, pulling at my every step, urging me to stay. The whispers that had once been soft and distant now grew louder, and this time they weren't just whispers. They turned into voices, strange, guttural sounds that reverberated through the very walls. The words they spoke were incomprehensible, a language older than any I had ever heard, a language that felt wrong to my ears. I tried to block them out, to focus on finding a way out, but the voices only grew stronger, more insistent. They seemed to follow me, wrapping around me like a storm, relentless in their call. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice raw from the fear that gripped me. But the words felt like they were swallowed up by the darkness. No one was there to hear them. The tombs didn't care. They were alive with the voices of the lost souls, trapped in this place for eternity. And now, they were aware of me. The realization hit me like a hammer. I wasn't just an observer here. I wasn't simply exploring the tombs. I had become part of them. And the more I tried to fight it, the more I realized that escape was not an option. The tombs had been built to keep something in, something powerful, something ancient, and it was not about to let me leave. The walls, the air, the very ground beneath me, they were all part of a curse, a force that had bound these souls in torment. And now it was tightening its grip on me. I stumbled down another passage, my breath coming in shallow gasps, my body trembling. But the further I went, the more I felt like I was being led somewhere, pulled towards something I couldn't understand. It was as if the tombs themselves were guiding me, drawing me to the heart of whatever evil had been sealed away here centuries ago. Then I saw them, the lost souls. They appeared suddenly, emerging from the shadows like figures from a nightmare. I froze, my body stiff with terror. There were so many of them, more than I could count, their forms flickering in and out of existence like ghosts. Their faces were twisted in agony, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Their eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to stare right through me, seeing something I couldn't comprehend. Some of them were humanoid, their bodies gaunt and skeletal, their movements jerky and unnatural. Others seemed less solid, their forms barely holding together, like shadows that had forgotten how to exist in the light. The air around them crackled with a coldness that seeped into my skin, chilling me to my core. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It was as if the very presence of these souls had paralyzed me, rooting me to the spot. The lost souls reached out toward me, their hands stretching through the air like ice-cold tendrils. Their fingers brushed against my skin, sending waves of freezing cold through my body. It was as if their touch drained the warmth from me, leaving me cold, empty, and helpless. They clawed at me, their bony hands desperate, pulling at my clothes, my arms, trying to drag me closer. I tried to scream, to fight them off, but no sound came out. My mouth moved, but the scream was trapped in my chest, as if the tunes themselves had stolen my voice. I could feel my body shaking, my legs buckling beneath me, but I couldn't break free. I was trapped in their grasp, and the more I fought, the stronger their pull became. Please, I thought, my mind screaming for mercy, but I knew it was useless. These souls weren't here to show mercy. They were here to claim me, to drag me into the same eternal torment they had suffered for centuries. I was no longer just a witness to their suffering. I was becoming a part of it. In that moment, I understood the truth. These souls had been cursed to wander this place forever, trapped in an endless loop of pain and regret. They had never been allowed to rest, never allowed to move on. They were bound here, their lives lost to time, their spirits frozen in the moments of their deaths, reliving their final breaths for all eternity. And now, they wanted me to join them. I could feel their desperation. They weren't just trapped in the tombs, they were trapped between worlds, forever torn between life and death. Their souls had nowhere to go, no place to rest, and they were hungry. Hungry for release, hungry for the same peace they had been denied, and I was the one they were going to claim. The altar, the bones, the darkness, everything in the tomb seemed to have been designed to keep them here, to ensure that they could never escape. And now they were calling to me, pulling me toward the very heart of their prison, toward the altar that had been at the center of their torment. I tried to pull away, to turn and run, but it was impossible. The tombs seemed to be closing in around me, trapping me in a web of shadows and whispers. The voices of the lost souls grew louder, their words becoming more frantic, more pleading. And I realized, too late, that there was no escape from this place. No way to outrun the curse that had claimed them and now was claiming me. The tombs had been built to hold the souls of the dead, but they had also been built to keep something far worse contained. And now, I had disturbed it. I had awakened the curse, and I was being drawn deeper into its grip, pulled into the very darkness that had held these souls captive for so long. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only feel the icy hands of the lost souls pulling me closer to the altar, to the place where their torment had begun. Their faces, twisted in agony, were all around me, their hollow eyes staring at me with an intensity that sent waves of fear through my body. The whispers began to crescendo, becoming a chorus of voices, all calling to me, urging me to join them. They weren't just voices anymore. They were a part of me, their presence filling my mind, my soul, pulling me into their eternal suffering. I could feel myself slipping, my mind unraveling as I was consumed by the darkness. And then I understood. I understood that I wasn't meant to escape. I had been brought here for a reason. The tombs, the curse, the souls, they had all been waiting for me. And now it was my turn. I had become just another lost soul, another prisoner of this dark, endless place. The tombs had claimed me, and there would be no escape. I was lost, forever, just like them. The terror I felt was suffocating, but something inside me snapped. It was as if a survival instinct had kicked in, pushing aside the fear that had gripped my mind and body. I could no longer stay in that place, trapped with the restless, tormented souls that had claimed me as one of their own. I couldn't remain in that dark, oppressive tomb, surrounded by the whispers of those who had been lost for centuries. I couldn't bear the thought of becoming just another soul, wandering endlessly in the shadows. I had to get out. I don't know what exactly gave me the strength to move, but when I began to run, it was as if my body was moving on its own, blindly, without thought. My legs carried me forward, the cold, damp air of the tombs rushing past my face as I pushed through the darkness. The whispers, those agonizing, haunting voices, followed me. They didn't stop, didn't fade. They surrounded me, filled my ears, and filled my mind. But I didn't care anymore. I was numb. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath ragged. But there was only one thing I could think about: escape. The walls seemed to close in on me, the tombs shifting with every turn I took, as if they were trying to trap me, to pull me back into their suffocating grip. Every step I took seemed to lead me deeper into the maze, farther from any hope of escape. But then, just as I thought I was completely lost, something changed. A faint glimmer of light appeared ahead, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It wasn't much, just a tiny sliver of light in the distance. But it was enough. I pushed forward, stumbling, desperate to reach it. I didn't think about what lay ahead or what could be waiting for me in the darkness. I just ran. The air was thick. My lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. The whispers, the voices, they were growing louder, more frantic, but I couldn't let them stop me. I had to get out. The dark walls seemed to close in around me with every step, but the light, that faint glimmer, kept me going. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I burst out of the tomb and into the open air. The sunlight hit me like a slap in the face, blinding me for a moment. I stood there, gasping for breath, my body trembling, as I tried to process what had just happened. The tombs, the whispers, the lost souls, they all felt like a bad dream, something that couldn't possibly be real. I had made it out. I was free. For a few moments, I stood in the sunlight, feeling the warmth on my skin, the fresh air filling my lungs. I was alive. I was safe. The tombs were behind me. The darkness left behind. The whispers, the souls, they were gone. I had escaped. But as I stood there, a deep unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The fear, the sense of something watching me, hadn't disappeared. It was still there, lingering just beneath the surface. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft. I turned around, my heart hammering in my chest. There was nothing there, just the empty space behind me, the open world, bathed in sunlight. I was standing in a place where I should have felt safe, where I should have felt relieved. But I didn't. The whisper was there, just out of reach, but it was there. I could hear it. It wasn't a trick of my mind. It was real. The whispering voices had followed me. They had escaped the tombs with me. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself that it was just my imagination, just the lingering effects of what I had been through. But deep down, I knew the truth. The souls, those lost souls, were still with me. They hadn't let me go. They had followed me out, and now they were here, in the world I had thought was safe. As the sun began to set, the air turned cold again, and the whispers grew louder. It was as if they had been waiting for the night to fall, waiting for the darkness to return so they could speak once more. I could hear them now, clearer than ever, calling my name, their voices echoing in the shadows. I could feel them, their presence surrounding me, just out of sight, always there, never far away. I tried to convince myself that it was over, that I was free, but I knew deep down that it wasn't over. The tombs were still in my mind, the whispers still in my ears. The souls had found me, and they weren't going to let me go. No matter how far I ran, no matter where I went, they would follow. They were trapped in this world with me now, and they wanted something from me. They wanted me back. At night, when I closed my eyes, I could hear their voices clearly, their soft whispers echoing through the dark corners of my room. They would call to me, pleading for me to return, for me to come back to the tombs, to join them in their eternal suffering. I would wake in the middle of the night, my heart racing, the sound of their voices still lingering in my ears. It was like a haunting, an unshakable presence that I couldn't escape. I know now that I will never be free. The tombs have a hold on me, and they always will. No matter how far I run, no matter how much I try to forget, they will always be there, calling to me from the darkness. One day, I know I will have to return. I'll have no choice. The tombs will claim me again, just as they claimed the souls before me. And when that day comes, I will be just another lost soul, another whisper in the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, you will too. If you ever venture too deep into the tombs, if you ever listen to the whispers, you will hear them too. They will call to you, just as they called to me. And when that happens, there will be no escaping. You will become part of the tombs, just another lost soul, trapped forever in their cold embrace. The tombs are not just a place for the dead, they are a place for the living too. And once you hear the whispers, once you know their call, you will never be free. The darkness will follow you, and the lost souls will always be there, waiting to claim you. Maybe I am just the first. You will be next.